name is Fred Sanderson. I was born and raised in Duck Bay, Manitoba. I went to school there and was a commercial fisherman for quite a few years, and then moved from there and went to university and became a teacher, and then taught for 36 years.
Oh. So what do you remember most about your upbringing and your childhood, Fred?
I remember most being outside and being just free.
Yeah.
We had Duck Bay is actually a peninsula that's about 1 kilometer long, and maybe at its widest point probably 500 meters wide. And then it goes down into a bay, and there was some people that settled in the bay, but most of the people were up on the point. And the point I'm trying to make here is in the summertime, we would go and we'd play, for lack of a better term, let's just call it cowboys and Indians.
Sounds good.
But our playground was from the one end of the point to the other end, and it would go literally all day long.
Yeah.
All day long. Like there'd be a bunch of us kids that would get together, and the younger ones were a group, and there was usually 10 or 12 of us. And then there was older boys. There'd be 5 or 6 of them, maybe 8 of them, and they would try to capture us, and we'd run away, and we used to have a lot of fun. My favorite Métis meal, I think, would be fish patties, specifically suckers. Yeah, we'd get them in the ditch in the spring. And I remember growing up and chasing them around and having a whole bunch of fun chasing them in the ditches and scooping them, and then it'd be a whole pile of work afterward, but it was all a lot of fun. My brothers and I would chase the fish for my dad and my uncle, and we'd go down the creek and round them up and chase them up the creek, and it was a lot of fun. Yeah. It is a lot of fun. But I like fish patties. I really enjoy fish patties. A very close second is moose nose. A moose nose is actually quite large. We think of a moose's nose as just being the end of his. A moose nose is actually quite large. Like a tongue, a moose tongue is about like that long. Yeah. If you take it properly. But you got to know how to harvest it. But when you do harvest it, there's a lot of work with, you work with fire, mostly singeing. You singe the hair off, and then you boil it. You boil the moose nose, and it takes quite a while, but it's a delicacy. It is something up until we lost my dad. This would be about 8 years ago now. Dad would make moose nose every Christmas Eve, and there'd be a pot of on the stove. We had a wood stove, and on the wood stove there'd be boiling, and it'd boil all day long, all night long, and come in and grab a piece of moose nose, and it's something that my dad taught to my son, and my son has made a couple of them already. It's a lot of work actually, but well worth the effort.
So when did you realize that you were Métis, or was it something that you always knew?
It was something that I always knew. I always knew. We hear stories of where the MMF came from and the origins of the MMF. But a story we don't hear a whole lot about is a story that I can relate to very well, and that's the story of my Auntie Mary Sanderson going and trying to get people to join the MMF. And it was solely for the purpose of helping people. helping them with their homes, helping them if they needed to go to the doctor. That was the whole inspiration behind what she was doing. And there were 3 of them originally. It was Auntie Mary, Ferdinand Gibosh. I think he was a Gibosh, I think. Yeah, and then from there it just grew outward, eh? But I think when we talk about the MMF, there was no real difference between treaty people and Métis people. In our language, in the Soto language, which is my mother tongue, we say Anishinaabe ga diben dizut. Anishinaabe is just the people. And they referred to us as the people, the same as they were. But Kadiben Dizut means who owns themselves. They didn't have to go, the Métis didn't have to go to the Indian agent and go and ask, well, can I go here or can I go there? I'm going to be off the reserve for this many days. And that's where that comes from. Anishinaabe ga diben dizut, the people that own themselves. That's what we were referred to as. There was, other than that, there was no real distinction. I mean, the culture was virtually identical. And I guess the other obvious thing is they lived on the reserve. And you'll see most Métis communities are right alongside of a reserve. And there was a reason for that. Yeah. It was that identity that they got from being around native people. They were restricted in that they couldn't live on the reserve. So what they did then is they moved somewhere nearby. That's why they were called, in history books, they're referred to as the road allowance people. Is because they stayed right along the edge of the reserve, but on the road allowance that really nobody owned. So nobody could tell them, okay, you got to move from here, because it's owned by the government. The road allowance is owned by the government. So you see a lot of Métis communities that were right along the edge of a road and right along the reserve. But I think there's an important distinguishment there that for a long time there was no difference between the Métis people and First Nations people. There was that line there, but the line never meant anything. I would go hunting on the reserve, and the people on reserve would come hunting in our area, and it was never ever an issue. It didn't become an issue until our people, as in our Métis people, our First Nations people, became leaders that started to push and say, we are Native people, we're First Nations people, we are Métis people, we are. But as I said, with me, I've known right from when I was very young that I was a Métis person. Occasionally you'd hear the term half-breed, but not really. My family, my extended family, actually comes up from around Silver Ridge and Bacon Ridge in that area. And that's where there was half-breeds. The term half-breed came in. You heard it there quite often, but not really around home. No. Oh. The other thing we do is we hunt a lot, mostly little birds and stuff like that, but we cook them and we'd eat them. Yeah, my middle brother would bring potatoes from the house and a little bit of flour and some salt and pepper, and me and my younger brother would go hunting, and we'd bring in birds and we'd pluck them, and we'd singe them and then throw them into the pot. and those are some of the things that really stick out from my childhood that really, that's lost today. Well, even the thing of looking at birds and saying, well, those are, you wouldn't eat that.
Yeah.
Well, there's nothing wrong with them.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with them little birds. They're just small, that's all.
Yeah.
And when you do them up, they taste like ducks. See, when we grew up, money wasn't something that drove us. You know, we needed it for certain things, but it didn't drive our life. In 1967, there was an article written about Duck Bay. We were considered to be the poorest community in the province of Manitoba. But I think what you got to be careful with there is the measuring stick that you use. Because the measuring stick that you use for Winnipeg and the measuring stick that you use for Duck Bay are two different things. I never felt poor. I never felt like, I think one of the terms in there was the grubby little urchins who would grow up to be nothing but alcoholics like their parents. That's a quote from that article from the Winnipeg Free Press. And but I never felt poor. I never felt like my dad. Right up until my dad passed on, my dad never had waterworks in his house. But we always made sure there was water in the house for him. And he didn't consider himself to be poor. So you got to be careful which measuring stick you're using. And I'm proud of this too. I think you could say that I was a professional poacher. We didn't have our rights to hunt. People that grew up in my era and before were poachers as far as society was concerned. So I think that was a big one. That was a big one because ultimately you're talking about putting food on the table. Now that we have our harvesting cards, I think that helps considerably. But now with the moose management, you can't really hunt moose. I'm looking forward to where we might be able to start going maybe across province, maybe into Saskatchewan, because they got tons of moose there, you know. And we're not talking about going and just slaughtering and, I mean, take one. That's all we used to do. I taught my whole teaching career in Duck Bay. I taught junior high, like grade 7, 8, and 9. Loved it. We got to understand that other people have said when I've commented that I taught in junior high, they say, "Oh, you poor thing." Things that we have to remember are kids are still kids. They just want to be treated with a little bit of respect. And I think we forget that. We just bark orders and expect them to obey our commands. You know, like one of the things that I pride myself on is being able to apologize to my students if something went wrong. If something was the way I thought it was and it wasn't, and I would just apologize to the kids to the kid in front of the class. I have a lot of the students I've worked with today still call me Mr. S and are still very happy to see me. In fact, just coming over here, I ran into one of my students and was very happy to see me and shook my hand like 2 or 3 times and was wondering how I was doing and etc.
Yeah.
I worked as a Penn student for 5 years and then I taught for 32 years. Awesome. Enjoyed it. I really, even today, if I could get back into education without the hassle of the parents, I would be there in a heartbeat. But education today has become so political. And the thing is, it's being guided by non-educators, people that are not from the classroom or in a classroom, or teachers are making decisions for people, front row people like teachers in the classrooms. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's like the suits are making the decisions, right?
Yeah, it's like going to a carpenter and you're not a carpenter and telling the carpenter to do this or this or this. I miss teaching.
Yeah.
I miss teaching. I find myself when I'm in waiting rooms, for instance, in a doctor's office or wherever, I'll come across an article I like to read and come and say, this would be a good article to teach this, or that kind of thing, eh? And I miss teaching, but I also enjoy not having to be anywhere that I don't want to be. If I want to be there, I'll be there. If don't feel like it, then I'm not going to be there. Okay, well, my wife is Angela Sanderson. We've been married 45 years, and my oldest daughter is Lori Sanderson. I'm quite proud of her. She works as a project manager in Pine Creek First Nation, and she has two of my grandchildren. My oldest is Chloe. She's going to university in Winnipeg at the U of W. And then my grandson is going to be graduating from high school next year. Yeah, and that's going to be something. I'm really proud of him in that he is going to be one that's going to carry on that traditional way. Like his dad learned from me how to put tobacco down when you're harvesting an animal, and how to respect that animal. When you kill a moose, to hang the bell. And Connor is learning all of that stuff. And then I have my middle daughter, Star Blanket. And Star Blanket works for Northwest Metis Council. She's actually at the daycare. She was a graduate of the Northwest Metis Council had a what they call early childhood education program. She was a graduate and was hired immediately upon graduation. There was absolutely no waste time. No wait time. It just went boom, she's there. And she went right into, and it's funny because the way she gets along with Francis and Marissa is, I can't really share, but it's at a completely different level. Let's just put it that way. It's just, Francis will say things to them that like, kind of thing.
In a positive way.
Yeah, in a positive way, then jokingly, yeah, but in a way that's like, whoa. And then my son is working in northern BC, and he works on the pipeline. He's been working there for over 10 years now. He went right out of high school, started pipelining, and I wanted him to get an education. But what do you say to a kid who's making $100,000 a year, and I'm teaching and making $80,000 a year, and I've been teaching for 20 years already, And his first year, he's making $100,000 a year. What do you say to him to say, no, you should quit that and go to school?
So that's a pretty hard conversation to have. I don't want to have.
Yeah. But he's doing well.
Yeah.
He's doing well. In fact, he's getting married this year. I like music. I really enjoy music. My son bought me a guitar 2 years ago. That there's only 100 of them in North America. And it comes with a letter of authenticity. And there was only 100 of them made in North America. Well, in the world. And he gave me that as a Christmas present. No, I play it.
Yeah.
I play it. I haven't been playing as much this past little while. When we get back to hobbies, I like to sing. I like to play the guitar. I like listening to music. I especially like listening to fiddle music. You say, how do you torture a Métis? You nail his shoes down and play Red River Jig.
Now, that's not the truth.
But the fiddle, I mean, very, very few places do you go and there's a fiddle dugout that you don't see people tapping along, and like it's got that, but it's unique. When we had the fiddle program in Duck Bay School, and that's where the fiddle program started, was in Duck Bay School. Frontier School Division right now has quite a few students participating in the program, but the program started at Duck Bay School, and I was one of the ones that helped get that off the ground. And another person, there was a professor at the University of Manitoba in music that came up. His name was Cameron Dick, and he came up and we got talking about a program and what a program would look like. And then I said what kind of music I wanted the kids to be able to learn. And yeah, it just took off from there, and it was really, and still going strong. But unfortunately, Cameron doesn't come to Duck Bay anymore. We actually have Joey Adamowski that comes and teaches there. He's still on continuing it, yeah. I think one of the things we've got to realize, though, with when we talk about culture, we've got to realize that culture evolves, right? History doesn't evolve. History is history, but culture evolves. And that's something we got to be mindful of when you're thinking of putting programming together, that this is not the same culture that was when I grew up, for instance, okay? Those type of things, like I said, that's where you need to bounce ideas off of people and get some feedback, and then work with that raw data and start to identify, yeah, here's something that we could look at, you know, using Venn diagrams to just basically organize the thoughts, and, you know, where do they overlap, and how do they support each other, you know, that kind of thing. It's just kind of organizational thinking is what it kind of comes down to.
That's what it all boils down to.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Good ideas, you need them ideas there. You got to have people that you can bounce some ideas off of, but they got to be recorded, and they got to be recorded in such a way that you have to know where you come from to know where you're going. They need to be aware of history, for instance. Where did the Métis people come from? How did they evolve to a people that you see today that identify as Métis people? I think of when you were talking and you'd sent me a note along some of the things that we'd be considering. And I thought about growing up, and when I grew up, I always kind of knew who I was. You know, like I knew who I was and I knew where I come from. I don't mind saying that in a sense that kind of moved me kind of to the front of the pack. You know, that's why I went on to become a teacher. That's why I taught for 30 some years. You know, you gotta know who you are or where you come from to know where you're going. And that historical part of it is important. That historical part of it tells you this is where you came from. And I said the big thing with culture and history, culture evolves, but history doesn't evolve. History stays the same. The history of 1867 is the same today as it was in 1867. And to learn about that history, and from there, then you start to get an identity. You start to get, and I always think of my uncle, and he was miles ahead of me before. Like I find myself sitting thinking at times of trying to remember things that he'd said to me. But one of the things he talked to me about, and this is when I say you got to know where you come from to know where you're going. At home in Duck Bay is a big peninsula that goes out like this, and there's lake right around us. And we're in the widest part of the lake, where the lake is 40 kilometers across. So you can't see the other side. Yeah. So what you do then is you go, and if it happens to be storming that day, and you're going and you need to go across, you're going along, and as you go along, you get your markers from where you're coming from. And you go along, and you get your marker, am I still going the right way? Mm-hmm. But as you go along further, you begin to become more aware. And there comes a point where you can't look back anymore. You can't see anything. But you already have that in you. You've experienced that, yeah, this is the way I have to go. You need to know where you come from to know where you're going.